I have the distinct feeling that I'm going to aggravate a few Molyneux fans with this video. But, despite the fact that I quite enjoy a lot of Molyneux's work, a bad argument is a bad argument. Debunked. And hence, this is universally preferable behavior. Debunked. 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 Debunked.
Because your beard tends to be very long, I'm going to shave it with the electric razor. I'm just going to sort of feel around your beard to feel the texture. Oh, you have an amazing texture. It's very easy to work with.
It's very easy to work with.
And Addie, what kind of fun do you think you're gonna have today?
Lots of fun.
Lots of fun. That's a good kind. Helping everybody. Solene, what do you think?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
What kind of fun do you think you can find here today? All kinds? All kinds of fun? Repeat after me. Abracadabra, 1, 2, 3.
Abracadabra, 1, 2, 3.
Now it's time to see what we see.
Now it's time to see what we see.
Give Mr. Wacky a nice round of applause, everybody. Mr. Wacky, this is an honor, first of all.
He had an ancestor, William Molyneux, great-great-great-grandfather, I think. And he was best friends with the famous British philosopher John Locke. I've read this in my ancestor's biography. They actually talked about pursuing universal ethics, but they were being chased around Ireland and England by the king, who wanted to arrest them for various blasphemies and so on.
Yeah, this is great, you guys.
Short people don't usually get to play basketball, and less intelligent people aren't worth that much money.
Even the big Levesque's doing the Mr. Wacky right now. Yeah.
And so for me, my family was my herpes.
Look, he's a Hitler lover. I guess he's an anti-Semite. He doesn't like the blacks. He doesn't like the gays. It's just incredible that anybody could embrace this guy.
Helping everybody.
Pinocchio. Some people think that it is just an animated film for kids, but it is when you grow old that you really feel it. And even when now, like I just said, Pinocchio, it really hits me. It really hits me. This boy out of wood. But what about us with wood in our hearts? Powerful stuff, Pinocchio. Just, it's just motherfucker. Don't let that Pinocchio experience end with puberty. Continue along with it and see where it takes you. Fix me up, old man Geppetto. Fix me up. Oh, I'm broken. So broken, Geppetto. So broken, Geppetto. who forgot to change the water bottle in the hamster cage. Ivan did. It took for the parrot to die for me to know that my parents would too. Oh yeah. Hello darkness, my old friend. Oh, I just watched that motherfucker last week and it almost like I never did before, even though 3 days before I did watch Pinocchio that day also. It's just something else. You probably haven't watched Pinocchio for a while since you were a kid, and even then you thought that this was outdated. Well, it's not for everyone to wrestle with the dark self.
And we start as puppets. And so the trick is to get rid of your goddamn strings. And you remember in Pinocchio, he faces a lot of temptations. One is to be a liar. The other is to be a neurotic victim. That's how he ends up in Pleasure Island, where he just about gets sold into the salt mines, turns into a brain jackass and sold to the salt mines, because it's run by authoritarians.
Have I used casual viewings of Lion King to highlight my passion for it and seduce women? Guilty as charged. But here we're talking about the frivolity of my 20s. Lion King is amateur hour, and the archetypes are basic and in many ways juvenile. My last thought is a simple one. It was around viewing 539 that I thought, what if I had a lying nose? Like mine, of course, wouldn't grow in the manner of Pinocchio, and it is, of course, the easiest thing to do is to lie to ourselves. And to what extent our lying noses really guide us? And this is something to consider, like, you have to grab it, and it's just, let's move on, okay? There is wisdom also outside of the Disney universe that's not as immediate and as intimate and personal to ourselves, but still very deep and still a lot to chew on. And there is one movie, which in this case is not animated, that really wrestled with the themes of death and mortality almost as well as Pinocchio did. And of course I'm talking about the movie where the main protagonist is a very wealthy man, and yet he finds himself alone in a mansion, frustrated by some sort of an angst, by a desire to go back to his adolescence, to go back to his late childhood and just go down the hill on the snow, wrestle in the snow, stuff like that. Motherfuckers, I can't sneak this one by you, you movie buffs. You already know what's at the tip of my tongue. Of course, I'm talking about the movie about the Milwaukee-based Kielbasa Baron. It's Snow Globe Boris.
Колбаса вареная, сосиски, сардельки и желательно без сои и всяких непонятных добавок консервантов. Нереально? Милости просим на колбасный завод.
Kielbasa. 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 Kielbasa.
This reckless tossing of kielbasa, so typical of the 1%, indicates like nothing else that the 1%, the masters of industry, are themselves the ultimate victims of the capitalist industry. They have robbed themselves of humanity, and now they compensate for that by slapping around perfectly edible meat. Chomsky Honk is validated, and I will try to finish the last video of his that I started. But of course, Snow Globe Boris is known for way more than just this kielbasa scene. There's really a lot more to it, And of course, no, you movie buffs, you know, I can't be 2 steps ahead of you because you're 2 steps ahead of me. I'm talking about that famous scene, the movie-defining scene, the Dame on the Bus scene. It's like one of the acolytes of the main character who's in the usury business, has been on some mode of public transit, spotted a lady, and she really got stuck in his mind for all these years. Now for him to be yip-yapping about it all these years later must indicate that this was one choice honey over there. But there's something more to this as well. Because if you look at the whole movie Snow Globe Boris in its totality, there is a kind of a banality, a banal condemnation of capitalism, if you like, a banal condemnation of greed, almost with an underlying Christian message, something that Pope Francis would write. But underneath this, there is something more subversive. Like, what happens when a man sees a beautiful woman? Well, presumably objectification. He couldn't possibly know her name. Where are these emotions originate? Where is this depth coming from? It's coming in a sense from sexual desire, from horniness. It is like some sort of a hook that punctured something within him, and then it dried, and all the libido was sucked out of it, but some profound gap remained, and he fell in there, and he's still flying within this hollow tunnel where lust once was, like Alice in Wonderland, and he can't get out. There is a sense of something that has been lost. There is a combination of profundity and base desire, a spark of desire that opens up this universe of longing that transcends it in a way.
One day back in 1896, I was crossing over to Jersey on the ferry. And as we pulled out, there was another ferry pulling in. And on it, there was a girl waiting to get off. A white dress she had on. She was carrying a white parasol. And I only saw her for 1 second. She didn't see me at all. But I'll bet a month hasn't gone by since that I haven't thought of that girl. Who else have you been to see?
And so it is with the hero of the movie. I mean, it's almost as if his normal pubescent development has been stolen from him. There was a Grinch who took it away. And instead, he grabs onto the sled with the reference with a vagina, perhaps, that he can't let go of, but he never fully had the ability to take that ride. All he can do at this point is get some soulless Jeffrey Epstein-type handjobs for himself. But that's not enough. There is a humanity that's been compromised through this, a kind of asexual continuum that began there, even if sex itself was physically present. I guess there is that old cliche about men thinking about sex every 3 seconds or whatever, but in this case it's almost like the notion of emotional depth goes through that. It goes through longing, it goes through... There's no longing without lust, I guess. And that's pretty provocative. That's kind of interesting, I think.
Throw that junk.
Hey there guys, did you realize that this video is supposedly about Stefan Molyneux and his moral theory of universally preferable behavior? That's right, it almost like I have dragged out the intro for as long as I could, because I fucking hate the topic. I hate Stefan and the fucking topic. It's like, Stefan, talk about a guy without a rose or a bud. This motherfucker has no woman who got away because his wife is chained to the radiator. Completely kind of a sexless, weird, slithering entity that just kind of slithers through existence, through the human world, pretending to be human and teaching us about morality. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Stefan. This video has been so painful to make that I procrastinated and sat on it for a month. I honestly wish that I never started this video, and this is, of all the dumb videos I ever started, this is the one that really kicked my ass. Stefan really kicked my ass. And this has to do with the fact that his theory of universally preferable behavior is stupid. But it's not just stupid in the same way that, like, conspiracy theories are stupid, or in the way that most ideas are stupid, like the anti-vaxxers are stupid. No, those stupid things are limited in space and time. They're confined. They have, you can pick them up like a brick and throw them out the window. Throw them out of your mind, out of your existence. You know how to respond to that shit because it's confined. Whereas Stefan's isn't. It just goes on and on. It goes on and on. And it's not that it's hard to invalidate. It's just, it's hard to respond to is what it is. Imagine you go to a job interview and they say, oh, wait in this room for a few minutes before the manager prepares. And you sit there and they put a bucket of diarrhea in there. And you're just looking at it and you're not sure what's going on. Should you leave? I mean, what's the reaction? I mean, indulging Stefan as a philosopher is kind of like playing peekaboo with a pedophile clown.
And that's the beauty of it. When it comes to UPB, if you call me wrong, I'm just more right.
This is something so stupid that it really, this UPB, that it really kind of reaches the levels of vileness. It's just disgusted. It's obscene. It's a stupidity so large and convoluted that it really has reached the levels of obscenity. And I really just don't know what to do with it. Before this, I dealt with Stefan in more confined environments, like Stefan on his stupid trip to Poland, Stefan talking about women or whatever it was. I never really wrestled with Stefan as a shit philosopher. And here I am, and I profoundly regret it, because the deeper you go into indulging Stefan as a philosopher, the more you enter his stupid vortex until you really have no idea what the fuck is going on.
Human beings have flown to the moon, but those ants are not as good at it because their little ant rockets only reach to the top of the tallest tree. Right? I mean, think of a machine gun and a bear, right? I mean, think of a herd of elephants and an airstrike. I mean, come on. I mean, this is all silly, but you understand, this is the whole point.
The raw material for this video is going to come from a debate between two YouTube giants of philosophy. First, over a year ago, Rationality Rules has made a video debunking Stefan's UPB theory, his theory of universal ethics. And then Stefan, for some reason, I don't know if he was in some psychopath hibernation, awoke from it over a year later and decided to do a response. So these are the two videos, the original Rationality Rules video and Stefan's response video, that's going to be the foundation for our examination of this horrible thing that should have never existed. I would just like to briefly point out that Stefan's symbol for his philosophical channel, the best fucking philosophy in the world, is a glorified makeup lamp. Just something to kind of look into.
Hi everybody, Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain. Hope you're doing well. So somebody sent me this video from a YouTube channel called Rationality Rules. It was published March 15th, 2017. And this fine young man is refuting or debunking my theory of ethics called Universally Preferable Behavior.
Steve asks, how do you know that all living organisms require UPB to live? Stefan responds,
so even by your own argument, you're not only wrong, you're immoral.
because organisms are alive because they practice UPB. Hence, premise 1 is begging the question.
And this guy says that he would prefer to sacrifice the truth in order to enhance the well-being of organisms. Are you beginning to see the problem here? The sophistry, the lies, the falsehood, the lack of commitment to even his own ethical standard. Horrible, wretched, ridiculous, wrong.
It looks like the great Polish-Canadian philosopher has really developed a bit of a case of a sore booty there from Rationality Rules' video. But he is right on one point. I have for a long time on this channel have insisted and called out Rationality Rule for a dangerous creep, really, who corrupts the minds of youths with his little cards and little debunkings and so on. He's just turning them autistic, frankly, if they weren't to begin with, which is fine. It's so good. Oh god, it's this video, I fucking don't want to do it, but... Alright, well let's, it's so good, okay? It was just an innocent joke about autism. I will just be too lazy to reshoot it, that's why I'm still talking. It was just a little joke, okay? He has the cards, and it's like, oh, debunked, you know, kind of a thing. Okay, I apologize. I myself am bipolar, and feel free to drop a few zingers with that.
So, for those of you who are unaware or in need of a recap, UPB is, to those who accept it, the definitive answer to all moral questions, and it alone can tell us what is really right and really wrong. It can tell us what we ought to value. Hence, if true, it's a very big deal. It's the answer that has avoided humanity's greatest minds for thousands of years, and yet Molyneux has found it, the cure to ethical cancer.
Oh my goodness.
I wasn't just, you know, a stroll-along penis with good genes.
What? I don't know what that means. I have never, ever in my life, and neither in the book nor anywhere else, ever claimed that UPB is the definitive answer to all moral questions. In the book, I focus on the 4 major categories of moral actions that need to be evaluated by any basic rational ethical system. The first is theft, the second is assault, the third is murder, and the fourth is rape.
In spite of all the slander of alleged accusers, and in spite of all the feminist lies, the philosopher has been kind enough, has been big-hearted enough to include rape as one of the 4 things we can do. Fucking Stefan, how awesome, motherfucking, I'm so pumped for this.
So if you have this old Aristotelian argument, he says, look, I don't care what you come up with your ethical system, but if you come up with an ethical system that could be used to prove that murder is moral and rape is good, you know, you kind of gone wrong somewhere. So I don't know what every conceivable moral question is, and I don't know how UPB can claim to solve every conceivable moral question. So, not a careful reading so far, my friend.
Now, the syllogistic form of Molyneux's UPB is fairly lengthy, containing many premises that are, in my opinion, not necessarily needed. But I do appreciate that they are indeed very useful for refreshing language and clarifying definitions.
This pile of shit happens to be extremely unuseful in refreshing language or clarifying definitions. I mean, I'm not gonna go through all of these 12 painful hits in the balls, but I'll just mention the first one. Reality is both objective and consistent. A dog is both obedient and loyal. So when you say that, there is an opposite to that dog who's obedient and loyal. But what about reality that's subjective and consistent? What would a reality that's not objective and not consistent actually look like? And in what levels of dimension? That is to say, for example, we don't understand everything that goes on in the natural world. So by definition, it cannot be consistent because we don't know what the reference point for consistency is. Like there could be a new virus that behaves completely at odds with what we understood as viruses to behave. There could be a new bacteria that comes from outer space or something. What would it be consistent with? It would redefine our borders of consistency. A lot of different levels of the theories of physics can be mutually contradictory, for example, and they're not consistent with each other, but they all work within their separate sphere. So yeah, it's there is no benchmark for consistency. And what if, for example, I'm riding in an elevator and there's an individual there who believes that he should punch me in the face because if he does so, he's going to save the world from the devil. Well, this would be a subjective experience defined by psychosis, and yet it would define my reality. You know, once again, it's just kind of a grand, pointless fucking statement that only clarifies things if you don't have baseline critical thinking skills.
However, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to focus on the sixth, seventh, and eighth premises, because that's where the crux of the argument lies.
6. Preferences are required for life, thought, language, and debating. 7. Debating requires that both parties hold truth to be both objective and universally preferable. 8. Thus, the very act of debating contains an acceptance of universally preferable behavior, or UPB. Debating requires that both parties hold truth to be both objective and universally preferable. I can't recall if I've got quotes around those things. I don't think I would. Maybe he's added quotes to this. I don't know if they're scare quotes. I never put truth in quotes because I accept and believe in universal truth. 8.
From here, Molyneux goes on to assert that because the very act of debating requires acceptance of UPB, that is, because premise 7 is valid, the only question to be asked is how theories regarding UPB can be declared as true. Which, to be fair, is a legitimate question if only premise 7 is valid. But it's not.
Philosophy is not like massaging your single mom's foot.
The first proof that Molyneux offers is the assertion that
if I argue against the proposition that universally preferable behavior is valid, I have already shown my preference for truth over falsehood, as well as a preference for correcting those who speak falsely. Saying that there is no such thing as universally preferable behavior is like shouting in someone's ear that sound does not exist. It is innately self-contradictory.
Imagine that I came to your house and you had a hamster, and I bought a hamster wheel for the hamster. And when the hamster started running in it, I would say, this is universally preferable hamster behavior. Now, would this be an example of a philosophical statement? Would you consider this to be a philosophical statement? Because it is at this point, and actually Stefan would make a claim exactly like this, say this is universally preferable hamster behavior, and it connects with human behavior. But effectively, this is where Stefan's bullshit fountain really starts flowing with these types of observation. So this observation is not purely philosophical in nature to the extent that it's philosophical in nature at all. It is an observational statement. It is an observation of behavior. And this whole thing with the debate happens to be the logical, the rational height of UPB. Like, as dumb and ludicrous as it is, this is the height of his achievement as a philosopher. And so I will spend a little time doing my own debunking. I'm going to debunk it a little bit here. Debunked. Okay, because this is at the core of the argument. So if we're actually looking at behavior of human beings, and we're looking at the behavior of human beings when they're debating, well, we can clearly see that debates are anything aside from a search for truth, by and large. Very few people enter debates with the readiness to be contradicted and corrected, which would be step one in seeking truth of any sort. The most important debates that happen in the context of the Western world, aside from potentially political debates, which usually don't matter that much because people have their pre-existing opinions, the most significant debates are going to be those within the legal system that are explicitly founded among the notion of not pursuing truth, at least every actor in it not pursuing truth. That is to say, there are many defense attorneys that know perfectly well that their clients are guilty, and yet they are expected to and required to act as if they're not and represent their interests to the max Just recently, I was reading another trashy true crime book, and in this book there was a man who was accused of raping a woman and then stabbing her and leaving her for dead. When he was consulting with his lawyer was a former FBI agent. He invited another guy to give him a lie detector test. And because this particular guy was a psychopath, he passed it. However, at the end of it, the administrator of the test told him that he failed. And so at this point, this guy just confessed to him and said that he did it. Now, was this reported to the court or by his defense attorneys? It wasn't. He went on to become a serial killer. So the bottom line is that truth is not the object of debates. Debates are a public performance meant to sway other people. They are effectively almost always propaganda campaigns based around confirmation bias. People are not interested in debates as some sort of a joint search for truth.
And the syllogistic rendition that he provides us with goes as follows.
1. The proposition is the concept universally preferable behavior must be valid. 2. Arguing against the validity of universally preferable behavior demonstrates universally preferable behavior. 3. Therefore, no argument against the validity of universally preferable behavior can be valid.
You arguing that you're not a slut in and of itself validates the fact that you're a slut. Well, this is what a little slut would do, a little whore like you. You would deny that you're slutty. You would deny your harlot ways. Your very ways of arguing just highlights what a little piece of trash you really are. This is really awesome. This is really some choice, juicy philosophy right here. A philosophy that begins with the invalidation of yourself as an individual, that the very act of disagreeing with it shows its validity. Motherfucker, it's just really nice cult philosophy. It's just running a cult 101, invalidating the individuality of the person who interacts with it.
If I state a preference for truth over falsehood when debating UPB, this does not mean that I have a preference for truth over falsehood in all things. For example, if there was a scenario in which I had to choose between knowing the truth but permanently diminishing the well-being of organisms, or not knowing the truth but permanently improving the well-being of organisms, I would choose the latter every time. I would choose falsehood over truth because I value well-being over truth. What we value personally is not universal. What?
Oh! Look! There's a universal statement of values right there on the screen. Can you read your young eyes? Can you read the text that's right in front of you? What we value personally is not universal. Right there. Universal statement. God, read that book again, dude.
All pigeons are birds. Well, you made a universal statement right there. The fucking philosopher got you, man. It's over for us. It's over. Just admit your defeat. First, it was that disagreeing with his theory validates Stefan's theory. Now, any kind of a universal statement validates Stefan's universal stupid behavior. This is really. I wish I could just quit right here now, because it's gonna get even more idiotic if you can believe it.
The second proof that Molyneux offers is the following.
1. All organisms require universally preferred behavior to live. 2. Man is a living organism. 3. Therefore, all living men are alive due to the practice of universally preferred behavior.
Hey, I got you guys protein shake.
Awesome, I love protein.
I know you love protein. I love protein too.
4. Therefore, any argument against universally preferable behavior requires an acceptance and practice of universally preferred behavior. 5. Therefore, no argument against the existence of universally preferable behavior can be valid.
Protein.
Protein.
Protein. Protein.
Protein. Protein.
So the fact that some people don't choose universally preferable behavior is kind of why we need philosophy. Of course people don't choose it. Right, so if you have, I don't know, I mean, I'm no dietitian, but let's say that there's some great diet for a particular ailment that you have. And he says, listen, you've got to eat this diet in order to deal with some ailment that you have. Now, of course, a lot of people aren't going to follow that diet, even if they know about it. That's why you have nutrition. Like, no, there's no obey gravity society, right? There's no experts in obey gravity because that's an automatic process of physics, right? So where we have a choice, we need to have an ideal. So the fact that some people don't follow UPB or some people will reject UPB does not invalidate UPB. Like, witch doctors don't practice science. Some people are bad at math. Some people hate eating well and exercising. That doesn't mean that science is a subjective discipline. It doesn't mean that nutrition is completely random. It doesn't mean that exercise has no positive benefits in any, right? You understand, right? So people can reject things. That doesn't mean those things are invalid. It means those people are wrong.
So if there's one thing that I can truly guarantee to you, is the fact that your ancestors have not uniformly practiced any type of universally preferable behavior whatsoever. In certain fields like medicine, it is effectively impossible, it was impossible to practice universally preferable behavior. It used to be like a lady would have acne and she would be suggested a treatment. Now you could say, oh, in order to attract a mate with our superficial standards, you would want to clear your severe acne from your face. And they would like blast radiation onto her face before they really understood the consequences, and then she would have a severe form of cancer that would 100% not be there if this was not advised by medical professionals. And for most of its existence, medicine has been basically quackery. It was just whatever somebody pulled out of their ass for the most part. Nobody knew what the fuck was going on at all. Whether it's mental illnesses or physical illnesses, people were completely clueless. So going to the doctor was just playing the lottery, and you would, in many cases, it would be much preferable not to do anything at all, and maybe you would live a little longer. So there was no universally preferable behavior allowed. But aside from that, even when we have things like rapists, for example, it is impossible that you don't have a couple of rapists in your family tree going down eternity. Well, not eternity, of course, but oh God. Mentally ill people, by definition, don't practice any kind of a universally preferable behavior. Their brain disorders affect their behavior suboptimally, and that's what makes it into a mental illness. And yet we have a lot of mentally ill people around now. Of course, two healthy people could have a child with mental illness born to them. However, that doesn't explain the whole population of people who are mentally ill. A lot of mentally ill people reproduce, and in other categories of people who don't lead perfect lives, people with alcohol problems reproduce, and of course people with drug addiction reproduce. So anyway, like, what is even the point of like talking about this? It's just like giving these completely banal refutation to just goofy statements. But okay. Okay, let's go on.
Moving on, let's take on proof number 3.
1. For a scientific theory to be valid, it must be supported by empirical observation. 2. If the concept of universally preferable behavior is valid, then mankind should believe in universally preferable behavior. 3. All men believe in universally preferable behavior.
It's the 4th of July. Yeah, we know it's true. The colors of the flag are red, white, and blue, and green.
4. Therefore, empirical evidence exists to support the validity of universally preferable behavior, and the existence of such evidence opposes the proposition that universally preferable behavior is not valid.
Starting with premise 2, we have another begging the question fallacy, as it literally includes the conclusion of the argument within it. In fact, it's as circular as saying, if the Bible is valid, then mankind should believe in the Bible. It's a ridiculous premise. And while we're on the topic of ridiculous premises, what on earth is going on with premise 3? Even if all men practiced UPB, which they don't, the claim that all men believe in UPB is just wrong. It's that simple. It's just factually and demonstrably wrong. A false premise. I don't believe in UPB, therefore not all men believe in UPB.
If all people believe and practice UPB, how could there be any contrasts, cultural or otherwise, or in development between different societies? How could this be possible? if people are prevented from practicing UPB by, let's say, political ideologies like Stefan is for the free market, but not everybody is, and presumably without a free market, you don't have the full range to practice UPB. Well, in that case, all these political ideologies are supported by at least a fraction of the population. So it's either that all these political ideologies are valid manifestations of UPB, or people who believe in false political ideologies that restrict the practice of UPB are not practicing UPB, in which case, okay, well...
What about proof 4? How does it fare? Well, it goes as follows.
1. Choices are almost infinite. 2. Most human beings make very similar choices. 3. Therefore, not all choices can be equal. 4. Therefore, universally preferable choices must be valid.
You know, it's strange, because Molyneux is a very articulate and educated person, but when it comes to arguments, he's just awful. For starters, premise 1, the claim that choices are almost infinite, can only be considered true if every micro-variation of every choice is defined as its own choice. Moving on, in premise 3, the word equal is critically ambiguous, causing the argument to commit an ambiguity fallacy. What does Molyneux mean by equal? Does he mean popular? If so, why would that matter? Throughout history, misogyny and racism has been incredibly popular, but...
Wait a sec. Did this dude just talk about racism and misogyny? Is that a moral argument? Racism and misogyny? Would you say that these are universally preferable behaviors to refrain from? Is racism and misogyny always bad? Because you're using moral terms, absolute moral terms, in a discussion about how there's no such thing as absolute morality. Oh, yeah, okay, so he's a lefty, so all right.
The philosopher's original response was to say he's a leftist. Oh, okay, Stefan figured it out. But anyway, instead of responding to the smug asshole about every self-satisfied and idiotic statement that he makes, I'd like to talk about universally preferable behavior as it relates to human beings. What is universally preferable, and what are our gravitational pulls when it comes to ethics? Human beings are tribal animals, and we basically have a division between personal interests and collective interests of other members of the tribe. We're at least partly wired to consider the interests of other people because, of course, we experience guilt even when we do something wrong to a stranger or have harmed them directly or indirectly. So we do have certain mechanisms to align ourselves with members of our tribe. And much of human ethics and morality is basically this distinction between what do we owe to ourselves and what do we owe to other people, to members of our tribe. And sometimes religion tries to transcend it, but realistically it rarely does. But one thing that Stefan doesn't address at all is the fact that you could be very open and ethical in your relation with members of your tribe and be completely horrible and dehumanizing toward members of other tribes. And so it's not exactly clear to me why, from an evolutionary point of view that Stefan will continuously bring up, why it is universally preferable for me to not dehumanize members of other tribes. Why is slavery wrong? It's kind of like a categorical imperative without any real imperative, is what Stefan says. It's just some sort of a sticker, universally preferable, but for who? This is never completely explained in any way whatsoever.
Oh, that woman's really hot. And she's like, oh, you know she has herpes, right? Ooh, like the hotness. Not such a big fan of the herpes. Oh, kind of a lot of tribal herpes there.
This is so much fun here.
Why would it be universally preferable for me, for example, if I walk on the beach and see a $100 bill, and I suspect that it belongs to one of the people on the beach? However, there is a possibility that if I say, hey, I found a $100 bill here, that a person who's going to take it was not the original owner of this bill. So how could the theory of universally preferable behavior in any way advise me as to what responsibility I have toward these other people, other members of the tribe? if I found $100 bill and it's not clear who it belongs to. I mean, this theory of universally preferable behavior really has no real-life application. I mean, within a tribe, things like theft and murder and rape are forbidden usually. I mean, rape, if for nothing else, because the wife is considered to be the property of her husband or her father before she's married, so raping her would be an infringement on his property. So by and large, those things are forbidden in all human societies that I'm aware of. But when it comes to mass murder and great crimes, they often are sanctioned when they concern people outside of the tribe. And here there is, once again, like with everything else, there is no coherent explanation or any kind of a moral imperative coming from Stefan's theory.
And finally, we get to Molyneux's fifth proof, and it goes as follows.
1. Organisms succeed by acting upon universally preferable behavior. 2. Man is the most successful organism. 3. Therefore, man must have acted most successfully on the basis of universally preferable behavior.
I'm John Cena!
4. Man's mind is his most distinctive organ. 5. Therefore, man's mind must have acted most successfully on the basis of universally preferable behavior. 6. Therefore, universally preferable behavior must be valid.
Where to start? Premise 1 is again begging the question. As for premise 2, the assertion that man is the most successful species, this is just childishly absurd, because it's arbitrarily assigning significance.
As I was watching Rationality Rules' original video, and he came to this part, I just assumed that Stefan would not respond to it at any length. I assumed that this point is so asinine, so completely brain-dead and idiotic, that Stefan would be capable of feeling some sort of a shame around carrying on about this shit, and he would just move on to something else or not include it in his response video whatsoever. But no, the philosopher pulled back his sleeves, and we're really gonna do some heavy philosophy where Stefan will present a number of examples pertaining to our superiority to other animals. Let's get ready for this intense philosophy here.
What exactly are humans the most successful at?
Philosophy, science, conceptual reasoning, abstract thought, art, music, literature, poetry, acting, singing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when was the last time you saw chimpanzees and an orchestra opening at the Met, right?
When have any of the chronic masturbators who have defooed half their family on your behalf, who spend their whole days fantasizing about a Japanese schoolgirl sitting on their face, when have any of them seen a chimpanzee, or for that matter, anybody opening at the Met? What kind of a high culture exactly have they consumed ever in their lives?
So, yeah, there are different levels of success, and human beings are the most successful at such a wide variety of things. I don't even know how to explain this. Like, if you want to really understand or learn about philosophy, you kind of need to look at what you're doing rather than all these abstractions to begin with. I'm an empiricist, so you start with what you're doing.
I'm an empiricist as well, and I have to say that I agree with Stefan here 100%. I mean, dude, when have you ever seen a chimpanzee riding a tiny bicycle? Alright, when have you seen a chimpanzee like wearing a tuxedo, or maybe smiling and hugging a pretty lady while wearing shorts? Have you ever seen chimpanzees do these things? These are uniquely human traits. Alright, dude? Okay. Well, fuck you, man. This is not what we're talking about here. We're talking in the wild. You're talking fucking circus shit, dude. We're not talking about the circus, dude. They don't wear little tuxedos in the wild or ride tiny bicycles. They wouldn't know the first thing about it. All right, man. You with your fucking circus, you should be ashamed, man. We're doing philosophy, heavy philosophy here.
So he's going to go in like, I don't know, but this next bit is going to be like giraffes are better at getting leaves from the top of trees, which is actually false because you can get a machine to get you. There are machines that you can get right up there to harvest the stuff from the trees. There are robots that can pick fruit and even strawberries and grapes and so on. But anyway, so he's going to say, well, human beings are not the best at stuff. But my question is, why doesn't he have a sea slug present his information? Why doesn't he just have a little, like, put the sea slug on the table and have the sea slug explain why UPB is wrong?
What Stefan has pointed out here is actually very important, man. Now, you're a little thick, you might have missed it. But the philosopher made an important point. Animals can't talk. Animals can't talk, and that happens to be syllogism number 11. That irrefutably proves that UPB is right. It's positioned right next to all men believe in UPB and all men practice UPB. It's kind of all there bunched up together, these great arguments.
Human beings have flown to the moon, but those ants are not as good at it because their little ant rockets only reach to the top of the tallest tree. So, yeah. We're better at just about everything than the animals are. So we are more successful in that we can do we can do just about everything the animals can do, and we can do near infinite things that the animals can't do. So, of course, success is in a conflict between two animals. The animal that wins, the animal that kills or escapes the other animal, is more successful, right? I mean, clearly, that would have to be the case, right? Because if you have two animals that are facing off over a particularly limited set of resources, think of gray squirrels versus red squirrels or whatever it is, right?
Oh, look, with the red squirrels and the gray squirrels, Stefan is channeling Heidegger again.
Think of gray squirrels versus red squirrels or whatever it is, right? This is one of the problems of multiculturalism, is that subspecies are all competing for the same resources within group preferences, which leads to huge amounts of social conflict. But
hey, Stefan, interestingly enough, you have just mentioned in-group preferences. And the word preferences reminds me of something. Oh, it's universally preferable behavior. Well, how do the two connect? Is it preferable? I mean, we have all practiced fucking UPB, and our ancestors and every flatulence of our great-great-grandfathers have been timed specifically in the most optimal way because the mind is our greatest organ. Even though the mind is not an organ at all. Well, Stefan, you're just a smug fucking cunt. You're scum, and I wish you were dead, frankly. How much longer can we be tortured with this idiocy? He just kind of fucking throws out these in-group preferences here with the fucking red squirrels and the brown squirrels and casual reference to the enemies outside of our gates. Oh, fucking let's move on. Let's move on. You know, none of the idiots who fucking hang on to your balls are ever going to question this type of baseline idiocy.
If you look at red squirrels versus gray squirrels, if the red squirrels are slower or less aggressive, then they get displaced by the gray squirrels. And we say, well, the gray squirrel is more successful because whenever there's a competition between the gray and the red squirrel, in general, on average, the red squirrel loses, the gray squirrel wins, the gray squirrel spreads, and therefore they are more successful. Okay. So let me ask you this. Can you think, again, allowing man his full access to technology, can you think of any situation where a man faces off against an animal with all of his technology and the man loses?
Every other bacterial disease, Stefan. Now, I know you have confined this question to animals, but before I heard with my own 2 ears that we're the greatest living organism, and now we're here to kick ass. We can kick ass any organism but aside from bacteria. So fuck you, you fucking asshole.
Right? I mean, think of a machine gun and a bear, right? I mean, think of a herd of elephants and an airstrike. I mean, come on. I mean, this is all silly, but you understand. This is the whole point. You understand. We can defend ourselves against animals really easily, right? You got a bear, just go into a house, right? If he gets into the house, you've got a gun or whatever, right?
Fuck you, bear. I'm off to the house, bear. Go fuck yourself. You don't even understand the concept of private property. You stupid fucking bear. I'll see what human tools I have in there to stop you.
Hey, what are you doing there? What are you doing there?
Now, just because the Roman Empire no longer exists, doesn't mean it didn't have its own achievements here and there. And in a sense, just because human beings have exterminated certain species, doesn't mean they didn't have a good run there that went on for hundreds of thousands of years, where they were perfectly adapted to that environment and human beings were not. Animals are just organic mechanisms designed to live in a specific environment. And though human beings, because of our... well, we have exterminated a lot of animals that are in our size range. However, when it comes to microorganisms and stuff like that, a lot of them are just flourishing and doing just fine. So you could say that humans have dominated a lot of the landscape and became an apex predator, but this is just a matter of time before we fucking submerge ourselves in the nuclear holocaust. And the animals that are, the organisms that are going to survive are the OGs, the microorganism, and then they would breed and create some other animals that at some point or another will have ASMR channels and shit like that that other animals cannot possibly appreciate.
I'm just going to sort of feel around your beard.
Well, my friends, it's time for the philosopher to wrap up, and in his last words to Rationality Rules, in this debate that he has concluded purely out of a desire for greater truth, we're going to return to some of those old classics.
It is really hard to grasp. You have to catch yourself in the act of debating and say, what is it that I'm doing? You cannot correct someone without reference to UPB. UPB cannot be denied. And that's the beauty of it. When it comes to UPB, if you call me wrong, I'm just more right.
What we saw right there, man, that's that old philosopher stare. This is how mentally adjusted, non-psychopathic philosophers conclude their arguments. Their arguments, they conclude with that stare. They just kind of look at you like lizards in a pet store. If you think I'm wrong, your mom's a whore. Well, now Stefan is gonna move on to another amazing arguments. Now, we have seen so many amazing arguments that made me want to pierce my balls with scissors. But now for the concluding act, Stefan says that even if you think that UPB is bullshit, as long as you believe that ethics should gravitate toward the interest of the greatest number of people, there's nothing better for that than UPB. That is to say that even if you think that UPB is a piece of shit, you should still keep mum about it because it's the best hope of humanity.
And this guy says that he would prefer to sacrifice the truth in order to enhance the well-being of organisms. Are you beginning to see the problem here? The sophistry, the lies, the falsehood, the lack of commitment to even his own ethical standard. Horrible, wretched, ridiculous, wrong.
Organisms require a subscription to rationality rules to live. You are alive. Therefore, you are alive because you are subscribed to rationality rules.
Because, you see, let's say he believes, obviously, that UPB is false. He's wrong, which is even worse, but let's just say he's right. He believes that UPB is false. UPB is wrong. It is false to say that UPB is true. But, you see, if people accept UPB, if he promotes the theory, if people accept UPB, what happens? What happens is people will stop, or at least they will reduce the prevalence of theft, rape, assault, and murder. You understand? So even by your own argument, you're not only wrong, you're immoral.
What Stefan fails to grasp here is that even as a lie, his theory doesn't make any fucking sense. It's just the same crock of shit, an incoherent crock of shit, just now in a different bag. It still doesn't make any sense. How can UPB be promoted by rationality rules who doesn't believe in it? If we already all believe in it and accepted it and have been practicing it for our whole lives, to the dawn of humanity we have been practicing. Accept fucking what, Stefan? We have already fucking accepted it. When we argue against it, we argue for it. When we see a hamster, we know who's the boss. We know who's the boss here who practiced universal behavior. It's our fucking ancestors in the jungle. They sat around and they said, this smells like ass. You try to have a conversation with these animals, I gotta get the fuck out of here and go to the plains and get myself a sweet antelope to eat, with universally preferable running toward them. We evolved to just run until the antelope collapses. That's why we can have marathons and no other animals can, because we can run forever. It's due to our behavior. It's just why fucking walk around here in the savannah when we can fucking run after the antelope, motherfucker. Animals can't talk, motherfucker. UPB for life. Fucking feeling that philosophy with Stefan. Feeling it. But thankfully this is over. My God, what a horror. I mean, I've never seen such a painful crock of shit. This fucking UPB is just like a noose around my head made out of Stefan's shit. I wish I've never fucking done this stupid topic. Avoid Stefan and his philosophy. I mean, it's just something so unbelievably stupid. There are so many fucking contradictions and idiocies within it. You even saw some exasperation on rationality rules. My friends, I'm gonna watch some Pinocchio.
Who's the busy man? Me? I'm chairman of the board. I got nothing but time. What do you want to know?
Well, Mr. Bernstein, we thought maybe if we could find out what he meant by his last words as he was dying.
That rosebud, huh? Maybe some girl. There were a lot of them back in the early days.
It's hardly likely, Mr. Bernstein, that Mr. Kane could have met some girl casually and then 50 years later on his deathbed.
Well, you're pretty young, Mr. Thompson. A fella'll remember a lot of things you wouldn't think he'd remember. You take me. One day back in 1896, I was crossing over to Jersey on the ferry. And as we pulled out, there was another ferry pulling in. And on it, there was a girl waiting to get off. A white dress she had on. She was carrying a white parasol. And I only saw her for 1 second. She didn't see me at all. But I'll bet a month hasn't gone by since that I haven't thought of that girl.